Now, just some things that kind of caught my eye with the AFC North and football. Just a basic little rundown we have here. The only team that failed to win in the North, surprising, was Cincinnati. But Cincinnati also played Cleveland, so you had 3 out of the 4. That's just the way it's going to be if two of them play each other. I mean, we all understand basic concepts of math. That's just the way that is. And we'll talk about that game first, even though it was probably the most, unimportant, unimportant, and least valuable game, I guess you could say, as far as any of the other teams that played. There was really nothing on the line besides the Browns' slim playoff hopes, which I'd hate to break it to you, Cleveland, but when we're talking slim, we're talking very, very slim. I think there's less than like a 5% chance. Because you got to think, you got to hope that Tennessee just falls flat on their face. You got to hope that Pittsburgh falls flat on their face. And you got to hope that Buffalo falls flat on their face. Meanwhile, you have to go in and play and beat a Baltimore team. And you got to play the Cardinals on the road, which that's no easy venue to play in. And then you got to play Cincinnati last game of the year, which Cleveland didn't win very convincingly yesterday. Obviously, the score will say that. The way the game came down, it's a lot of just stupid, just inefficiencies in the red zone. Pick 6 really hurt. That was early in the game. But, outside of that, everybody wants to think that Cleveland has this great shot of getting into the playoffs. And they're really by the skin of their teeth. I can understand if they controlled their own destiny, but they don't. They have to win out and hope that a bunch of teams ahead of them lose. You look at Pittsburgh that just jumped to 8-5, and then Buffalo's 9-4. Buffalo has to win one more game, and there's no way you'll get them for their 5th spot or 6th spot, depending on how they do and Pittsburgh does if they play each other this upcoming week. And then on the same hand, you got Pittsburgh at 8-5. They only got to win two of the last 3 games. And then you got to hope, like I said, the Tennessee falls on their face, and then you win all those games. And Cleveland might have beat Baltimore earlier in the season, but there are very slim chances of them making the playoffs, in my opinion. But the game just basically came down to, just Baker, made plays when he needed to. The running game, they got it going in the second half. And that's basically the story of the game. Cleveland just really started establishing the run in the second half, and Cincinnati really had no answer for it. Cincinnati was able to run the ball really well. But, at the end of the day, Cleveland was just too much with Chubb and Hunt. And, you got to tip your hat off to them. And then, Cincinnati had really not a whole lot of trouble moving the ball outside of the pick 6 that they threw, but they just couldn't get anything going positive in the red zone. Once they got in the red zone, they either moved backwards or just stupid play calling just resulted in either of them turning the ball over on downs or settling for field goals. And, it all just came down to that in the end. Outside of that, one thing that I will say is that this Cleveland team is just so dysfunctional, and I think that's a lot of what's kept them out of this playoff conversation for the most part. They've been rallying here late in the season with, having a pretty favorable schedule. But between the, it starts from the top, with Freddie Kitchens. I don't think that he's the answer at head coach. he looks baffled half the time, like he just keeps that laminated playbook piece of paper in front of his face and just stares at it all game. Baker's quick to jump on people. He's not really one to put it on himself. I mean, and then he backtracks. He's just young. Maybe he'll get out of it. Maybe he'll mature a little bit and stop pointing fingers at people and then taking the things that he says back and actually just being a mature leader. I believe I watched a segment of Undisputed a while back, and Shannon Sharp was talking about how John Elway never did that. John Elway was a great leader, never threw any teammates under the bus. He pulled you to the side yourself during the game and said what he said, and that was it. He could have had a great game where he only had 3-4 incompletions, and there was several drops and fumbles by other players in the offense, and he would come out and say, I have to play better, I have to make better throws, I have to do this and that and the other. Held all the accountability on himself, and that's what one of the most important parts of playing the quarterback position is. I mean, he thinks he's being edgy and he's rough around the edges because he's not afraid to challenge anybody or whatever. But cool. But this is the big leagues, man. You can't go in there and just and doing that stuff. Sure, some of the younger guys, and Cleveland is one of the youngest teams in the league. Maybe some of these younger guys look up to it and think it's cool, I guess. But the immaturity shows on the football field too, with the amount of penalties that they commit and stuff like that. And I just need to see another year of Baker, and I think that just to see if maybe he does mature and he maybe puts his head more into football than making 75, commercials, progressive commercials. Or Nationwide, whatever the heck it is. It's usually on mute whenever I see it because I've seen them enough. But that's just my take on that. I think Freddie Kitchens will be done by the end of the season. I don't see any logical reason why they would want to keep him. I don't think he's the answer whatsoever. But yeah, that's just my take. It's just really sad to see such a talented team, and everybody was giving them such high praise going into this, this season, and preseason favorites to go to the Super Bowl. I think there were only like 2 or 3 teams that they had better odds than the Browns did, and now they're a below 500 team right now trying to get into the playoffs. So you just really got to see how it plays out. But I really don't like their chances moving forward. I really don't, just because of just the hole that they dug themselves in and what they've got ahead of them with these other teams that have less that's needed to advance into the playoffs. And speaking of playoffs, and it's a team that's just punched their ticket into the playoff is Baltimore. Baltimore won against Buffalo, obviously, yesterday. And just my takeaway from that, they pressured the heck out of Josh Allen. I think they got like 6 sacks on him. He really couldn't do anything. But outside of that, he still a one-possession game with, it came down to the last minute, and Buffalo had a chance, just, fell short. It's probably one of the best defensive teams that Baltimore has seen this year. And it's, well, what about New England? I'm starting to really think, the way New England's kind of fallen off, I really think that they just kind of had the AFC equivalent of the Dallas Cowboys. I think they just took advantage of very, very bad competition. They had an easy schedule. They seem to always have the easiest schedule. I don't understand how, but they do. They had an easy schedule, and they just kind of chomped out some of the weaker opponents. The Buffalo team that they played early in the season was without Josh Allen, and that still, wasn't a huge convincing win. I think they have a lot of opportunistic players in their secondary with, Gilmore, leading the league in interceptions. But outside of that, they're not as dominating as what people thought they were. It's just crazy how people just get on a team and they just they continually ride them all season long, and then you have some slip ups like this, and they're done. But I mean, it's valid because they really haven't played anybody, and when they do play good teams, they get beat. We've seen now with started with Baltimore, then Houston, now Kansas City. What do these three things teams have in common? They're all leading their division. So all three division winners went in and beat New England. So, but I digress. Going back to Baltimore. Um, I it's hard for me to say. Yeah, this is I like to talk about the AFC North. I follow the AFC North, but clearly, as you can see, I'm not a Baltimore Ravens fan by any means. Probably one of my least favorite teams in that division, just because of their coach, and I've just never been a huge fan of them. Um, but I think I have days where I feel like that team is going to get exposed. I think that they have a very vanilla playbook that they open up to Lamar Jackson. I'm not trying to take anything away from what he's doing. I'm not that kind of person all the time, but if you look at it, he typically is coming in there. I believe last week he only threw for 105, maybe 110 yards and had 90 some yards rushing. He's not like blowing the lid off the defense or anything. It's just kind of they give him these easy routes that he can play off the tight ends. He really loves his tight ends, and if he doesn't have it, he's got the speed and the athleticism to take off and get several yards, off of good coverage and outrunning linemen and linebackers and getting to that next level and making a couple plays and running out or doing what he does. He's had some Madden-worthy highlights for sure. I'm not taking anything away from the guy. I'm just saying that I think that kind of brand of football will be exposed in the playoffs. I mean, look at Kansas City. Kansas City is one of the two losses that Baltimore has. They were able to beat them. That could be a potential team that they will face. So that's just kind of my takeaway from Baltimore. I mean, kudos to them. They, clinched a playoff spot. John Harbaugh just said that was the reaction in the locker room. Really didn't feed off of it too much. Whatever. Like I said, good for them. They're going to represent the division well in the playoffs, I think. But there's just some days where I feel like they're going to get exposed. I mean, I haven't been so high on New England with what they've done. And obviously, when you look at how well they've played against good teams and then what they've done to the bad teams, they've had that, like I said, the Dallas effect. Part of me says that this might be the end for New England. But then another part of me is saying they're holding a lot back for the playoffs, and it's just going to take Tom Brady just to get in a rhythm, and then he's just going to do what he's always done. And you can never count them out. You can't count them out until they're out, because they just, even when the Ravens got into the Ravens got into the Super Bowl, and the Broncos got into the Super Bowl for those 2 years with Manning. They still found a way to be in there and be competitive and be involved, and then somehow just came right back, and then for the top of the AFC. And as bad as they have been playing, they're still sitting right now currently. If the season ended today, they would have a first round bye. So I mean, it just speaks to even in a somewhat down year for them, what they're able to still do. And this isn't the greatest AFC East that division that they've faced, but Buffalo is for real, and Buffalo is making that division interesting. But there's only so much one other team can do. It's more or less kind of what's going on in this division, the North, with Pittsburgh's playing really well. I mean, they're in they kind of are like Buffalo, where they're relying heavily on their defense, but they, you know, the cream of the crop is obviously Baltimore in the division. Same can be said for the AFC East or whatnot. But that's my takeaway from them. And finally, we had Pittsburgh, go on the road and beat Arizona. It was a very good game. The defense really showed up. I got a little sick and tired of seeing those stupid plays where they get a turnover and then they, run 40 yards into the other end zone and then they got to sit there and pose and do their thing and all this. And you're just doing your job. I don't know why, I guess tomorrow when I go into work, I'll go in there and I'll pose whenever, I do something that I'm supposed to do. I complete an order, I'll just pose. It's ridiculous. I don't understand. I think it's just the NFL got a little crazy with their whole anti-celebration flags that they threw, that they got rid of it. And maybe this is just a lot of pent-up celebration, rage that these people are letting out. I don't know, but it's getting a little out of control. It's not even, I've I really haven't experienced it as a fan. But even then, I don't know how much I don't know how pumped I could get about it. Like I said, it just seems obnoxious. They're going to throw flags and penalties for taunting and this, that, and the other, unsportsmanlike conduct because you went like this to some player. You just bumped your helmet against him and kind of got a little aggressive. Didn't shove him, didn't punch him, didn't do anything like that, but got a little aggressive. They'll throw a flag for that, but they have no problem with, 11 guys running down the field 40 yards and, doing their best new kids on the block pose. But I digress. The whole point of this topic was to just talk about how well their defense played. I got a little off topic there. But anyway, they played really well. They sit at that final 6 seed right now, as I mentioned before, at 8-5. They're always going to be a mystery. They're always going to be in a dogfight with every team they play because of how closed the playbook is and how they don't really allow. It was Rudolph at first. Now it's Hodges. They don't really allow them to do a whole lot. They don't want them to make many mistakes, go over the top with the ball too much, and they're also battling some key injuries on the offensive side with Juju and James Conner. I believe the guy was Deontay Johnson, who's a rookie, who was the leading receiver on the team, and I believe I read somewhere that said he had they said he had 32 yards receiving and 35 yards of pass interference yards. So he had more yards for him in pass interference. Defensive pass interference. He helped the team. He didn't hurt the team. But, so he had about 3 to maybe 5 more yards of penalty yards than he did actual receiving yards, which is kind of crazy if you really think about it. But they were able to get the job done. They were able to win. It's not easy going out west. It's not easy for a west team to come out east and play. But they did what they had to do and they won. And they got a tough Buffalo team. This might be the team that gives them the trouble. And I think they end up the season with the Jets and then the Ravens. So. The way it looks right now, they could very much possibly sneak a win out against Buffalo. If not, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to beat the Jets. And then, with Baltimore already clinching a playoff spot, this could be a time where they maybe sit out a lot of their starters, maybe play a quarter, and Pittsburgh has a chance to play against a lot of their backups and maybe steal a victory, one of those kind. We've all been there and experienced that, at some point or another. But yeah, as far as and as far as getting into the playoffs, it's like I said before with them, they're going to be in a dogfight every single game because of how limited they are on offense. So you can't really say anything super positive about them and looking going forward. Will this team hold a Lombardi trophy? No, not at all. But with how great their defense plays, if they can, they could put themselves in any game, and they've played some great teams and been there and won because of their defense. They've dominated a lot of games too because of their defense. The Chargers game in particular was one where the defense just took over. The offense didn't really do a whole lot, but they didn't make a lot of mistakes. They didn't turn the ball over, and their defense basically won the game for them. So, yeah, once they get in, they're looking at probably a matchup with Kansas City if it sits the way it sits right now, which I don't see why it wouldn't. But can they beat Kansas City and Arrowhead? I don't think so. I liked their chances a lot better when their offense was healthy, and obviously not having been has completely changed the dynamic of this team, which is kind of unfortunate because these 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 moments aren't easy to come by. To have such a great defense. I mean, you look at how great Chicago's defense was last season, and I think they're a shell of who they were this year. They're still a good defense, but they're not even close to what they were last year. Same can be said about the Rams. I mean, you can't expect to just go in every year and you're just gonna just take off and ascend. I mean, even if you keep a lot of the same guys, I mean, sometimes they flatten out. So when you have a defense that's on the up and they you don't know how long it's going to be for, but yeah, that's my take for them. I just feel like they've done a lot with very little, and it's impressive from what they've been able to do. But they're really not going to do too much, and they're not going to really shock the world come playoff time, I don't think, unfortunately, because what they've done offensively. And lastly, as far as AFC North teams go, with Cincinnati, they had the graphic up yesterday, and then they also put it up last week, I believe, where they said that Cincinnati's lost 6 games by a touchdown or less. Obviously, they lost this game to Cleveland by 8. You look at the team and you think that if they could have got half of those games, they'd be looking a lot different than their 1-12 record shows. And I guess all I can really take from that is just to say that the NFL is just one of those games that's 1 or 2 breaks can make or break your game. The way the ball falls sometimes, it's unfortunate. And this team isn't as bad as the 1-12 record shows. I feel like, though, moving forward, this team is obviously going to be lucky to win another game, maybe 2. They might be able to win the game against the Dolphins, win their season finale against the Browns. 3-13, maybe a 2-14 season. Obviously not what they expected, but they had a lot of key injuries. I mean, you got to think the best player on their team, without a doubt, AJ Green, hasn't played a single snap this season. So it kind of speaks to the depth that they do have. The offensive line is playing a lot better. That's something that they struggled with early on in this season, which kept them out of a lot of ball games. In particular, the Pittsburgh game. First meeting between them where Pittsburgh had 9 sacks. If they get Jonah Williams back, and he plays to the level that they think that he can play at, he'll be a starting left tackle. I don't know what they'll do moving forward with Cordy Glenn. If they'll keep Cordy Glenn based on the stuff that he was doing this season, with whether or not he was faking, how the seriousness of his concussion that he had. Because, concussions are a very serious thing in this game, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the seriousness of them, but I really seriously doubt that one would last 10 weeks. And like I've said before in my earlier episodes that I posted, if it is a serious issue, then he might want to consider stepping away from football for a little bit, because if it takes him that long to heal, obviously there's something there, something wrong. But, I heard that he had issues in Buffalo with, having injuries take longer to heal than what they probably should. Excuse me. And a lot of trainers said that he was ready to go. He was healthy, and he doesn't practice, and he doesn't make the starting roster and doesn't play. That's something that's followed him into Cincinnati. I think moving forward, I like the hustle, the determination that this team plays with. They don't tank. I'm obviously a fan, but I'd still try to keep a very biased opinion towards them and every other team in the league, and I feel like I've done that pretty well. But, I was never one of those fans that encouraged tanking. I hate it. I don't think they do it as much in the NFL as what maybe they do it in the NBA, especially with this load management and stuff that they do, and try to preserve the life of these players, and stuff like that. I really truly believe that every single game that they went into this season, they had the expectation that they were going to win, and they played to win. And you could see that. Something that really speaks levels to me and makes me pretty optimistic as far as being a fan is how we're the least penalized team. There's not a whole lot of issues that take place in the locker room. Bickering between players, head coaches. You don't see players throwing stuff on the sidelines or throwing fits or anything like that. With the slight exception of Joe Mixon yesterday, he was a little frustrated at times, but he obviously made up for that with over 140 yards rushing yesterday. I don't think it's so much of they're pointing fingers and blaming, the coaches and this, that, and the other. I think they truly, all of them inside that locker room, feel like they can suit up and play against some of the best teams in the league. And it just speaks to their competitive fire that they have. Nobody's taking any time off. Nobody's looking into the off season. They're wanting to give everything they got. Even AJ Green came out and he hasn't said a whole lot, but just basically what you can take from what Zach Taylor says, which I like to believe a lot of what he says. I really think he's a great coach for us right now. He says that AJ wants to play. Everybody says, well, he has. It's, we're getting ready to get into the 14th game of the season. Shut him down. Don't let him play anymore. And he's just week to week like he's been all season. And he wants to play. They all want to play. They all want to win. And, the Finley experience, I was in favor of that. And we clearly saw that he's not the answer. So I guess it's pretty clear now that they're going to go into this offseason, barring anything catastrophic. And by that I mean them winning out, somehow finishing 4-12, and Miami finishing 3-13, or the Giants, they could go 2-12 and get the number one pick. I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that Cincinnati will probably end up with the number one pick. And you got to go with Joe Burrow. And I think you can't really pass on what could be a potential franchise quarterback. Next season, Dalton will go into his 10th season, and I look for them to kind of take the approach that they took with Carson Palmer, and having him come in and play, or having him sit the bench while Dalton plays, could finish out the last year of his contract. It helps him. It gives him that leadership role with the team. Can also, propel him to, if he ends up doing well, he can show Burrow a lot of good stuff, and the following season he can get traded, or he can sign. Well, he would sign with somebody else, and who knows what he would do with the remainder of his career. But he'd be going into his 10th season, so he's had some time, and he's definitely getting older, and if he can put Burrow under his wing for a good season, and then kind of what like I said before with what they did with Kitna and Palmer, I really feel like Dalton is a way better mentor than what Kitna was to Palmer. So you could get a lot more out of Burrow than say what Kitna was able to get out of Palmer. Although Palmer really, outside of Dalton, has been, here in recent memory, they're one of our best quarterbacks that Cincinnati's ever had. But that's just kind of how I take it. I take it as like, I go, I'm a season ticket holder, so I go to, all their home games. I still go with the expectation that we'll come and play hard, and I don't see them taking plays off, and I see them fighting until the end. And I don't feel like it's a wasted trip to go down there as a fan and watch them play, because I know that they're trying. And there's a lot of these negative fans that come into this, and they just want to see us lose for whatever reason. They've kind of went the whole putting bags over their head and stuff like that, and they want to complain about upper management and the front office, which, that's fair. You can do that. I'm not telling you how to be a fan. But, really what keeps me going, keeps me, pumped up for the game and, watching them, is that it's all about the players. I'm in there for them, wanting to see them do well and basically stick with them, because I'm a lifelong fan. So I've been through some very, very bad seasons and some decent seasons, and I take the good with the bad. But I guess that's the one thing I will hang my hat on. I won't beat this drum too bad, but they play hard, they fight. The record doesn't speak to the level of ability and talent that this team has. I've seen a lot worse 1-12 teams in my day, and I don't think they need a full-fledged rebuild. I think they're a couple pieces away, a couple key injuries. If they can prevent a lot of that, we're looking at a different team. I'm looking at maybe like a potential kind of San Francisco turnaround if they can draft really well and get a couple good key players moving forward, because they've got a lot of great pieces there. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. That brings me to the end of it. I hope you guys enjoy this new format that I'm going with it. For those that have been waiting patiently and stuck by my side and supported me and wanted me to get back to doing this, I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be back doing this, and then going to be back on it, serious and put content out there more frequently, and not go on such a long hiatus this time. But like I said, thanks again. You guys know the routine. If there's anything that you want covered, or you have any concerns, going with this new video format and stuff makes it a lot easier, a lot quicker to be able to put and process material out there. In the future, I look maybe for a Q&A, a live Q&A, and also I'll take guests onto the show, and I'm fine with that. We can talk shop all day and have a great time doing it. Said again, thanks guys for the support. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do. Thumbs up and a like, and I will be back.